The first time anyone saw Jonah Miller, he was standing barefoot on the front porch of the Whitmore orphanage, clutching a yellowing teddy bear to his chest, eyes wide and unblinking under the porch light. The boy couldn't have been more than 3. There was no note. No crying. No knock on the door. Just the soft creak of wood under tiny feet and a hush that fell over the night like a spell. He never spoke. Not to Mrs. Whitmore, who took him in without question. Not to the other children, who whispered theories into the dark about demons and ghosts. And not even to the therapists who came in every few months with their clipboards and flashcards and 2 bright smiles. He just stared, those pale blue eyes a little too still, a little too knowing. The doctors called it selective mutism. Trauma-induced. Maybe he'd seen something. Maybe he'd been through something. But 10 years passed, and Jonah stayed silent. Until one night. But before that night, the town of Elmridge had mostly forgotten him. He was just another quiet orphan in an old Victorian house on the hill, a place that smelled like mothballs and rain-soaked wood. He'd grown into a tall, thin boy with a perpetual haunted look and a way of slipping into the background like smoke. Jonah didn't join games or classes with the others. He painted. Alone. Always alone. His paintings were strange, landscapes no one recognized, faces no one knew. A crumbling red barn beside a field of white flowers. A rusty green truck under a tree struck by lightning. A girl with strawberry blonde hair standing at the edge of a lake, her face half in shadow. They were beautiful and eerie, like snapshots from a dream that wasn't yours. Mrs. Whitmore kept the paintings stored in the attic. They unsettled the other children. They unsettled her, too, though she never admitted it aloud. She just said Jonah was gifted, and left it at that. But everything changed on the night of the thunderstorm. It was late September. The kind of storm that clawed at the windows and shook the lights in their sockets. The kids had all gathered in the living room, telling ghost stories and daring each other to go down to the basement. Jonah sat on the floor in the corner, sketchbook on his lap, pencil scratching. Then, the lights flickered and died. A scream. Laughter. More screaming, half fear, half thrill. And then silence. All eyes turned to Jonah. He had frozen, pencil mid-stroke, his gaze fixed on something none of them could see. His lips parted. Barely. Like he was tasting the air. "Do you guys hear that?" Mia said, the oldest girl at the orphanage. "It sounds like..." But she was cut off. Jonah stood up. Slowly. His bare feet made no sound against the hardwood. He walked past the kids, past Mrs. Whitmore who had just come in with a flashlight, and out the front door into the storm. "Jonah," she shouted. "Get back here, you'll catch your death." He didn't look back. The wind howled as Mrs. Whitmore rushed to follow him, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The kids crowded behind her, whispering, their faces pale. They found Jonah in the front yard, standing at the edge of the garden where the earth dipped into a thicket of trees. He was whispering. His voice was barely audible over the wind, but they all heard it, words forming like breath on glass. "She's still there," he said. It was the first time anyone had heard his voice. "She's still in the well." For a moment, no one moved. The wind hissed through the trees like something alive. Thunder rolled overhead, shaking the ground beneath their feet, and Jonah, so pale, so still, stood like a statue carved from moonlight and shadow. Mrs. Whitmore's flashlight trembled in her hand. "Jonah," she said, her voice cracking, "what did you just say?" He turned to look at her, eyes distant and strangely calm. "The girl. In the well. She's waiting." The flashlight beam jittered across his face, and for the first time, she saw something behind those eyes. Not fear. Not pain. Recognition. "Jonah," she whispered. "What girl?" But he was already walking, barefoot through the mud, into the trees. The others hesitated. Mia stepped forward, hand out. "We should follow him." "Absolutely not," said Mrs. Whitmore. But Mia was already moving. One by one, the children trickled after her, drawn by something they didn't understand. And in the dark woods, their footsteps sounded like a prayer. Jonah moved like he knew exactly where he was going. Past the old cedar grove, through the gully behind the orphanage, down a trail that hadn't existed for years. They reached a clearing. And there it was. A stone well. Half collapsed. Choked with weeds and ivy. No one in town remembered it ever being there. Mrs. Whitmore stopped in her tracks, heart pounding. I didn't even know this part of the woods existed, she breathed. Jonah stood before the well, eyes wide, hands trembling. His voice, barely a whisper, cut through the storm. Her name is Lila. MIA blinked. Who? She used to come here. We played. I remember now. She was scared of the dark. Jonah, Mrs. Whitmore said gently, stepping forward, who's Lila? He looked at her, and in that moment, he didn't look like Jonah anymore. I was here, he whispered. But not as me. I had a different name. Different parents. We lived near the fields. I think it was 1987. The world tilted. Mrs. Whitmore felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. What are you talking about, Jonah? He turned to the well. I pushed her. We were playing. She fell. I tried to help her, but she didn't scream. She just disappeared. The silence after that was crushing. The flashlight flickered. No one believed me, Jonah said softly. I told my father. He said I was dreaming. Then they moved away. I always thought it was a nightmare. But it wasn't. It's real. I saw her. Just now. Jonah. She's still down there. Mrs. Whitmore walked to the well's edge. She aimed the flashlight down. The beam fell into darkness, catching on slick stones and coiling roots. Nothing moved. Then, something shifted. A glint. A pale shimmer. MIA gasped. There's something down there. Mrs. Whitmore stumbled back. Everyone, back to the house. Now. But Jonah didn't move. He dropped to his knees beside the well and placed his hands against the stone. I remember everything, he said. I remember her face. The thunder cracked overhead. Rain poured in sheets now, soaking them to the bone. And somewhere deep below, a hollow creak echoed upward. Jonah, please, Mrs. Whitmore begged, grabbing his arm. You're scaring me. He turned to her, voice distant. I was Benjamin Harper. I was 10. Lila was my best friend. I never meant to hurt her. Mrs. Whitmore's heart stuttered. Benjamin Harper. The name ignited something in her brain like a match to dry grass. She remembered the story. Barely a whisper among the town's older folk. A child gone missing. A cold case. The fields. The farmhouse. A mysterious disappearance that had haunted Elmridge nearly 40 years ago. She stared at Jonah, at this boy who claimed to be someone else entirely, and realized her legs were shaking. She wasn't sure if it was from the cold, or from something else. You need to come inside, she said, voice tight. Now. Jonah didn't argue. He stood slowly, hands muddy, eyes full of an age they shouldn't have. They walked back in silence. The wind howled behind them. And in the clearing, the old well waited. Unmoved. Unseen. But not forgotten. News of the incident spread through the orphanage like wildfire. By morning, every child was whispering Jonah's name. Not in ridicule like before, but in awe. In fear. In something deeper, more primal. Mrs. Whitmore tried to keep a lid on the story, but you can't hide a miracle. Or a ghost. And what Jonah had said. About a girl in a well, about a past life, it hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table long after the children had gone to bed, Jonah included, and made herself a cup of tea with trembling hands. By 3 a.m, the name Benjamin Harper was burned into her thoughts. She opened her laptop. The search was quick, the results sparse. The case had gone cold decades ago, long before digitized archives were common. But one name kept appearing in newspaper scans and old forum threads. Lila Grayson, age 9. Disappeared without a trace in October 1987. Her last known location? A field behind her house on Hawthorne Road. A property that, according to county records, had backed onto a thick patch of forest. Now known as Whitmore Woods. Mrs. Whitmore leaned back in her chair, blood gone cold. Her hands trembled on the trackpad. She clicked on an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local girl missing, police stumped." And there, in the middle of the column, was a single line: "Local authorities have questioned neighbors and family, including Benjamin Harper, a 10-year-old boy and friend of the missing child. No leads have been confirmed." Mrs. Whitmore closed the laptop. The boy upstairs wasn't just making things up. Or if he was, it was with a level of detail no 10-year-old could fabricate. Either he had read about the case somehow, dug up the names, the story, the forgotten well in the forest, or he was telling the truth. By morning, the storm had passed, but the house felt different. Heavier. Jonah didn't come down for breakfast. Normally, that wasn't unusual. But after last night, everyone noticed. MIA was already pacing the hallway by the time Mrs. Whitmore climbed the stairs. She knocked on Jonah's door. No answer. She opened it gently. Jonah sat on the bed, staring at the wall. His sketchbook was open beside him, pencil marks covering the page in frantic, overlapping lines. A face. A girl's face. Wide eyes. A dimple in her cheek. Hair pulled into 2 braided pigtails. Mrs. Whitmore picked up the drawing. "Is this Lila?" He nodded slowly. "She talks to me now," he whispered. Mrs. Whitmore felt the air thin around her. "What does she say?" "She says she's tired. She wants to go home. She's cold. And scared. Still." Jonah turned his head, eyes hollow. "I can't sleep. When I close my eyes, I see the fall. The way she looked up at me. The way she reached out." He started to cry, not loud sobs, but quiet tears that tracked his cheeks like rivers. It was the first time she had ever seen him show emotion. "She didn't scream," he said. "She just slipped." Mrs. Whitmore sat down beside him, not sure what to say. Her hands folded in her lap, tight as steel traps. "There's something we have to do," Jonah said suddenly. "We have to dig." She blinked. "Jonah. I know where she is. You already showed us the well." "No. I mean where her bones are." That evening, after calling in a favor from the local sheriff, a man named Tom Beckett who had once lived in Elmridge before moving to the city, Mrs. Whitmore found herself walking back into those same woods, flashlight in hand, Jonah beside her. Beckett had been reluctant at first. Cold cases didn't get warmer just because a kid had a dream. But the name Benjamin Harper, tied to the exact location of a girl's disappearance. It was enough to make him pause. He brought 2 deputies. Jonah led them back to the well without hesitation. "She's not in the well anymore," he said. "She was moved. Afterward. I think someone tried to hide it." The air grew still. Not even birdsong. "Where?" Beckett asked. Jonah walked 10 feet beyond the clearing, to a spot beneath a crooked elm. "Here," he said. The deputies started digging. It didn't take long. Less than an hour in, one of them let out a shout. Mrs. Whitmore moved forward. Beckett stopped her with an arm. In the hole, partially wrapped in what looked like faded cloth, were the unmistakable remains of a child. Small. Fragile. Bones stained with time. And something else. A necklace. Plastic beads, red and yellow, strung in a clumsy loop. Still intact. MIA, watching from behind the trees, gasped. "She made that," Jonah whispered. "I gave it to her." Beckett turned to him, face ashen. "How the hell did you know that?" Jonah looked up at him. "I didn't." Then, after a pause, "But he did." The site was sealed off by dawn. Crime scene tape laced the trees like yellow veins. Forensics teams arrived with floodlights and quiet voices, digging carefully beneath the roots of the old elm. What they uncovered sent a chill through the entire town. The bones were indeed human. Child-sized. Female. Cause of death, unknown. But trauma was evident. A cracked femur. A fracture in the skull. The kind of injuries that could come from a fall or worse. The necklace, now sealed in a clear evidence bag, became the focus of conversation. The beads matched a description buried in the original case file. Made by hand, the family had said. A birthday gift. Lost the day Lila vanished. Beckett stood over the scene with his arms crossed, face unreadable. Jonah sat nearby, bundled in Mrs. Whitmore's shawl, legs pulled to his chest, eyes distant. He hadn't said much since they found her. Only that he felt her go quiet. Like a radio that had been playing in the back of his mind for years had finally been switched off. "She's not cold anymore," he murmured once. That was all. By afternoon, the news broke. Remains identified as missing girl from 1987, Elmridge cold case reopened. Local media exploded with speculation. The Harper family, long since moved away, were unreachable. Lila's parents had passed on years ago, never knowing what happened to their daughter. Their only surviving relative, an aunt in Maine, agreed to claim the remains. Elmridge changed after that. A little town stuck in time, now suddenly pulled into the spotlight. But it was Jonah everyone talked about. The boy who never spoke. The boy who whispered a name no one had uttered in 30 years. The boy who remembered. In the weeks that followed, Jonah became both legend and mystery. People came to the orphanage. Reporters. Psychologists. Paranormal investigators. A man from a university tried to convince Mrs. Whitmore to let them take Jonah for a series of studies. She threw him off the porch. The other children treated Jonah like something between a prophet and a curse. Some stopped talking to him altogether. Others tried too hard, asking him what else he remembered, whose secrets he could expose. He didn't answer. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. He had opened a door inside himself, and the wind coming through it wasn't done howling. One night, Mia came to his room. She knocked softly, then let herself in. Jonah sat on the floor, sketching again. The same girl. Lila. Only this time, her face was peaceful. She was smiling. Mia sat beside him without a word. After a long silence, she whispered, "Does it hurt?" Jonah looked up. "What?" Remembering. He thought about it. "Yes," he said. "But not all the time." She watched his pencil move. "Are there more? Inside you?" Jonah didn't answer. Not directly. He flipped to a blank page. Began to draw again. A new face. Older. Male. Scar on the jaw. Faded military uniform. A look of rage and regret mixed like oil and water. He didn't speak. Mia watched him shade the eyes, dark, deep-set, grieving. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Who's that?" Jonah's pencil stilled. "I don't know yet," he said. 3 days later, a woman arrived at the orphanage. Sharp heels, dark suit, leather gloves despite the summer heat. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Kane. She introduced herself as a researcher from the Institute of Transpersonal Studies. Her card bore a golden eye etched into the corner. "I've heard of your boy," she said to Mrs. Whitmore with a smile too white. "And I believe he may be the key to unlocking something extraordinary. I'm not interested in handing him over to scientists," Mrs. Whitmore replied flatly. "Oh, we're not scientists," Dr. Kane said, still smiling. "We're something much older than that." She left a folder behind. Inside were photos. Documents. Diagrams of brain scans and energy maps. Pictures of other children across the world who had remembered lives not their own. Some had drawn maps to buried remains. Some had named killers. And one had led authorities to a hidden room inside a cathedral wall in Italy, containing a skeleton in armor dated to the 1400s. Jonah's picture had been added to the file. And written across the top in bold ink, Subject 11, Recurring Condits. That night, Jonah dreamed of fire. A battlefield. Screams. Blood on his hands. And in the distance, Dr. Kane. Smiling. Waiting. Jonah awoke gasping. His bedsheets were soaked in sweat, twisted around his limbs like vines. His heart pounded against his ribs with the force of a drumbeat, and the ghost of smoke clung to his nostrils. He could still hear the battle, metal crashing on metal, hooves pounding, a voice shouting his name in a tongue he didn't recognize but somehow understood. Talric, it had called. Talric, get up. The name echoed in his skull long after the dream had faded. Jonah sat up, breathing hard, staring at the shadows on the wall. It wasn't just a nightmare. It was memory. As clear and sharp as the moment he'd watched Lila vanish into the well. But this one was older. Deeper. like it had been buried beneath layers of dust and dirt, clawing its way back to the surface. And at the heart of it all, Dr. Kane's face. He didn't know how, but he was certain she had been there. Downstairs, Mrs. Whitmore flipped through the file Kane had left behind. Her eyes scanned each page with mounting dread. It read less like scientific research and more like a doctrine, complete with notes on soul anchoring, fractured lifelines, and something she didn't understand at all, the echo well. That phrase appeared multiple times, underlined in red ink. A paragraph caught her eye. Subject 4 described a consistent gateway between lives, a fixed place where death lingers. Often underground. Sometimes water-bound. Always cold. Referred to it as the echo well. Belief, physical locations act as emotional anchors across incarnations. She closed the file, heart hammering. The well in the forest. Jonah. The whisper. He wasn't just remembering Lila. He was remembering himself again and again. And now, something else was beginning to bleed through. By the next morning, Jonah had drawn the battlefield from his dream. A massive plain scorched black. A fortress crumbling in the background. And the figure he called Talric, a warrior in armor, eyes burning with grief. He showed it to Mia. "Is that you?" she asked. "I think so," he said. "Or I was him. Or maybe I still am." She looked at him, face tight. "What if it doesn't stop?" Jonah didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the next page and began sketching again. This time not a memory, but a place. A room. Stone walls. Candles. A symbol on the floor like a sun splitting apart. He didn't know how he knew it. But something inside told him, this is where they take the others. That afternoon, Dr. Kane returned. Mrs. Whitmore met her at the gate. "I told you already, he's not going anywhere." "I don't want to take him," Kane said, calmly removing her gloves. "I just want to talk to him. 5 minutes." Mrs. Whitmore hesitated. "Why?" Kane's eyes narrowed slightly. "Because what's happening to him won't stop. Not on its own. And I'm the only one who can help him survive it." The word survive lingered in the air. Jonah, watching from the upstairs window, already knew she was lying. He could feel it. She wasn't here to help him. She was here because she wanted something inside him. They met in the library. The rain had returned, tapping gently against the tall windows. The room smelled of old paper and dust. Dr. Kane sat across from Jonah, hands folded neatly on the table. Her smile was polite, predatory. "You remember things that aren't yours," she said. "That's not your fault." Jonah stared at her. "But what you might not know is that some memories want to return. Especially the violent ones. The ones cut short. The ones that scream." Jonah said nothing. Kane leaned in. "And I believe you're a nexus. A rare kind. You draw them in. You house them. That's why I need your help." Jonah tilted his head slightly. "Help how?" "To find the rest. There are others like you. Lost. Fractured. Dying young because their minds can't contain the weight of too many lives. But you're strong. You survived your first return. We can teach you how to control it." "What if I don't want to?" Kane smiled wider. "You already are. The question is whether you want to understand it or drown in it." She slid a small black key across the table. "I'll be waiting. When you're ready." Then she stood and walked out. Jonah picked up the key. It was ice cold. He closed his fist around it. That night, he had another dream. Stone corridors. A dark hall lit by torches. Rows of children whispering to themselves in different tongues. And far below, a voice chanting in a circle of flame. "Bring them back. Bring them all back." And when he looked in the mirror within that dream, it wasn't Jonah staring back. It was Talric. And Talric was screaming. The scream echoed through Jonah's bones. He jerked awake in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, the scream still clinging to the air like the fading ring of a bell. But this time, it wasn't just a dream. He could feel something in the room with him. Not a presence. A pressure. As if the walls themselves were leaning in. The black key Kane had given him lay on the nightstand, faintly pulsing like it was breathing. He stared at it for a long moment, heart hammering, then reached out with a trembling hand and closed his fingers around it. A shock zipped through his palm. Not painful, just familiar. His door creaked open a second later. Mia stood in the hall, pale-faced, clutching her blanket. "Did you hear it?" Jonah nodded slowly. "I was having this dream," she whispered, stepping into the room. "I was on a ship. Like, an old ship, with sails. There was this girl beside me. She had my face, Jonah. But it wasn't me. And she was tied to the mast. Screaming. She sank to the floor. What's happening to us?" Jonah stared at the key. "I think it's spreading." Downstairs, the orphanage creaked under the weight of silence. Outside, clouds curled thick and heavy over the moon, blotting it out in smothering layers. The trees surrounding the house swayed without wind, like they were moving of their own accord. The next day, 3 more children reported nightmares. Mason, the shy boy who loved paper planes, said he was in a jungle, naked, running, spears flying past him. Grace, the chatterbox who never stopped humming, woke screaming and crying, claiming she had drowned inside a tunnel of stars. Even Lenny, who believed in nothing, sat silent at breakfast, refusing to speak at all. Jonah watched them all, something tightening in his chest. The door had opened. And now things were coming through. Mrs. Whitmore tried to make sense of it. She called doctors, therapists, even a priest. But nothing helped. The children were changing emotionally, mentally. Some grew distant. Others lashed out. But the worst was Mason. He vanished during recess. 1 minute he was folding a paper airplane near the swing set, and the next, gone. No footprints. No sound. Just the plane still fluttering in the grass, half folded, damp with dew. They found him 2 hours later, curled up behind the woodshed. His eyes were open. But he wasn't there. "Where did you go?" Mrs. Whitmore asked, crouched beside him. He blinked slowly. "Home," he whispered. But not this one. Jonah knew what he had to do. That night, he slipped out of bed and tiptoed across the creaking floorboards. The black key pulsed in his pocket like a heartbeat. Mia was already waiting for him by the front door, flashlight in hand, coat wrapped tight around her thin frame. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To the well," Jonah said. It started there. They moved through the forest in silence, the path clearer than it should have been, as though the trees remembered them. The clearing appeared like a breath held too long. Jonah approached the well slowly. The bricks were cold, slick with moss. He knelt, reached out, and slid the black key into a crack near the base. Something clicked. Then groaned. And the ground trembled. Mia stumbled backward as the earth beneath the well split with a thunderous crack. The structure shuddered, then began to lower, stone by stone, vanishing into the earth like an elevator. Revealing stairs. Narrow. Carved into rock. Spiraling down into darkness. Jonah turned to Mia. His face pale, but resolute. "You don't have to come." She stepped beside him. "Yes, I do." They descended together. Into the hollow beneath Elmridge. Into the place that connected not just past lives. But something far older. Something watching. Something waiting. The air grew colder with every step. The spiral staircase descended in perfect silence, the walls carved from ancient, damp stone. Water trickled somewhere deep below, a slow, rhythmic drip that echoed with unnatural clarity. Neither Jonah nor Mia spoke. Their flashlight cast flickering shadows on the walls, shadows that sometimes didn't match their movements. 10 steps in, Mia grabbed Jonah's arm. "Did you see that?" He didn't answer. He had. For a fraction of a second, her shadow had shown her holding a lantern. Wearing a bonnet. A long dress. Nothing like what she wore now. And his had held a sword. They kept walking. After what felt like an eternity, the stairs ended in a wide corridor. Symbols were etched into the stone, curling and branching like veins of gold and ash. Jonah brushed one with his fingertips. It felt warm. "This is the place from my drawing," he said. They followed the tunnel, winding through the earth. The walls pulsed faintly, like a heart buried underground. The symbols glowed dimly with every step they took, reacting to their presence, remembering them. The passage opened into a vast chamber. A stone floor stretched out beneath a dome of jagged rock. In the center, a circle had been carved, ancient, ritualistic, edged with runes. Inside it, 7 candles burned, though no one had lit them. And above it all, etched into the stone ceiling, was the sigil Jonah had drawn in his sketchbook. The sun, split into 3 fractured halves. "It's real," Mia whispered. Jonah stepped forward. "This is the Echo Well." The name came from somewhere deep in his bones. He didn't know how he knew it. He just did. As he crossed the chamber, the flames flared, reacting to him, recognizing him. And then the voice came. "You've returned." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was behind them. In front of them. Inside their heads. Jonah turned slowly. Shadows danced along the chamber walls, forming a silhouette, tall, thin, eyes like dying stars. Not human. Not quite. A presence more than a person. "Talric," the voice said, "you found your path again." Jonah's mouth went dry. "I'm not him anymore." "You are what you carry," it replied. "You open the door. And now, it cannot be closed." Mia stepped beside him. "Who are you?" The thing tilted its head. "I am the memory between lives. The keeper of echoes. The weight you leave behind." The flames darkened. The chamber throbbed like a pulse. Jonah felt it rising within him, a pressure of lives unlived, voices not his yet utterly familiar. He could see them, flashes behind his eyes. A woman screaming in firelight, holding a baby to her chest. A soldier bleeding out in a muddy trench, clutching a photograph. A young girl falling through ice, breath catching in her throat. Mia clutched her head. "Make it stop, Jonah, please." But he couldn't. The circle had been activated. And the weight of who they had been was coming home. Then another voice echoed through the chamber, harsh, human. "Stop this." Jonah turned. Dr. Kane stepped from the corridor, a black robe now hanging from her shoulders. Her eyes burned with purpose, hunger thinly veiled by professionalism. "You have no idea what you're unlocking," she snapped. "You think this place holds memories? It holds doors. And you've just turned the handle." Jonah backed away. "What is this place?" "It's where souls recycle," she said. "Where time bleeds. The Echo Well connects every version of you. And if you cross that threshold untrained," she glanced at Mia, "you'll drown in yourselves." Jonah looked at the circle. The flames. The ghostly shape watching. "I already am." And with that, he stepped into the center. The flames roared. His body arched backward, arms spread wide. The chamber exploded in light. And Jonah's voice, clear, deep, layered with 1,000 tones, screamed one word. "Remember." The light tore through the chamber like a sun reborn. It wasn't just brightness, it was presence, pressure, raw memory pouring from Jonah's body like water breaking through a dam. The runes carved into the stone lit with ancient fire, spinning in patterns only the dead could read. The ghostly figure of the keeper, the voice between lives, recoiled, not in fear, but in reverence. Mia dropped to her knees, hands covering her ears, eyes wide and overflowing with tears. She could see all of him now. All the versions of Jonah. He was Talric, bleeding in armor. He was Benjamin, sobbing by a well. He was a nameless monk, chanting in a mountain cave. He was a pickpocket in Victorian London, knifed in an alley. He was a woman in chains, leading a rebellion with fire in her eyes. And through it all, his voice echoed. "Remember. Remember. Remember." Dr. Kane screamed, the word slamming into her like a physical force. Her feet skidded back across the floor as if the chamber itself rejected her. She reached for a talisman around her neck, a shard of black stone etched with cracks. The light from the Echo Well met the stone with a soundless collision. The shard shattered. Kane gasped and dropped to her knees, clutching her chest. "No, no, this isn't how it's meant to go." Jonah lowered slowly to the stone floor. The flames around the circle burned lower. The chamber grew still. And Jonah opened his eyes. They glowed not with light, but with understanding. I saw them, he whispered. All of them. And they saw me. Mia reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation. Cain tried to stand. Her face was pale, waxy, like something peeled back and exposed. You could have given it to us, she said through gritted teeth. We would have taught you control. Helped you carry it. Jonah turned to her, his voice quiet but steady. You don't want to help. You want to harvest. You don't care about memory. You care about power. Her silence was confirmation enough. Mia stepped forward. What do we do now? Jonah looked around the chamber. This place is a wound. It's not supposed to be open. The keeper stepped forward again, drifting above the runes like a mirage. It has always been open. But it does not always bleed. Jonah nodded. Then I want to stop it. I want to let them rest. The keeper tilted its head. You would seal your own door? Yes, Jonah said. I remember now. That's why I came back. A pause. Then. Very well. The chamber began to shift. The runes slowly turned inward, the glowing trails converging. The flames dimmed to embers. The circle pulsed once, then stilled. The echo well, closed. Not gone. Just sleeping. The way back up the stairs was silent. Cain didn't follow. She stayed behind, clutching the broken talisman and staring at the circle that no longer responded to her. Jonah and Mia emerged into starlight. The forest was still, the wind like a sigh of relief. And for the first time since he was 3 years old, Jonah smiled. Days passed. The nightmares stopped. The other children began to laugh again, slowly, uncertainly, like animals poking their heads out after a storm. Jonah still remembered. But the noise was gone. The screaming. The fragments. The tug of lives not his. What was left now was peace. Or something like it. 1 week later, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a plain manila folder. Jonah opened it at the breakfast table, with Mia beside him. Inside were 8 photos. Children. Teens. 1 adult. All with the same distant look in their eyes he once wore. On the back of the final photo, in looping black ink. There are more of us. When you're ready, find us. You're not alone. Mia looked at him. You're not going to stop, are you? Jonah looked out the window, past the trees, toward something far away and rising. Not yet, he said. There's more to remember. That night, he dreamt again. But this time, it wasn't fire. It was snow. A village in the mountains. A wolf circling the edge. A woman's voice calling a name he didn't yet know. And Jonah, smiling as he walked toward it.